Okay, all right, let's prepare the live stream now, okay?
The at work.
Okay, all right.
That's like, boss was talking today. Stuff we had left there, they realized that we were there, and then they can't find stuff.
Where's it?
No, they didn't work off. I ain't found this.
I just call it that line out of me.
Yeah, I called.
All right, so do live.
I found some of the stuff out of one. Okay, really have no stuff.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I do something.
Oh, okay. Right.
He's a good one.
Yeah.
He's a good one.
Probably will.
Still lost.
Okay.
That's Mr. Wayne's.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
if it helps the land.
Good evening.
All three.
Yes. And I agree with the same cover. They will be graduating in December.
I can hear you, Tammy.
Great, thank you, Patsy.
Hi.
And 1 minute. All right, please. At this time, I need a motion to turn to open session. So we'll.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say motion and aye. Motion carried. All right, this time we're down to our personnel report. Dr. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, at this time, I'd like to recommend the following exhibits for your approval. Exhibits A through D.
Second.
I got a motion and second on the floor. Any discussion? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All those in favor say motion, they say aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. All right, we're down to our constructional technology update. Ms. Hill, Ms. Bolton.
Mr. Chair, before they begin, would like to make a couple of comments just about each of these presentations so that then I won't interrupt them moving forward and won't have any introductory on mine either. Pandemic has brought about an interesting situation for us. It's brought about a real opportunity. We've talked about going one-to-one technology for a number of years since I've been here. We've been working to lay the groundwork, including technology infrastructure, and to move forward. We had always looked at this as being a phase-in process because we knew that the price was going to be great just for devices. Devices alone are going to be between $2.8 and $3 million. One of our biggest fears has always been buying all of the devices at one time and then them all aging out at the same time. Problem though, the situation has presented itself that we've been given the money because of the pandemic, and now we really don't have a choice to phase in or not. We are in the process of purchasing enough devices to go one-to-one in the entire school district, as well as to do the necessary infrastructure work. But the issue here is going to be, we're going to have to do a lot of different things at one time because we're not phasing it in. We're just doing it all at once. The one-to-one initiative is not purchasing 7,000 devices and putting them in children's hands. It's not only doing that, but teaching teachers how to teach using technology so that they're not just something for students to carry around. So the goal tonight is to give you a 30,000-foot overview of what it's going to take to do it. We have a lot of means at our disposal to make this happen. This is not a 20 mil ask tonight, and I don't want anybody to feel like that we're putting you in a corner. Not only do we have questions, but we have solutions for how to handle it. In addition to that, Mr. Willard's going to bring you a financial update that shows when a lot of people felt like that this was going to be a financial bloodbath during COVID, that we're actually very stable. And not only that, but we're continuing the trajectory that we've had for the last number of years on doing things like paying down debt and increasing fund balance so that we are very solid. Finally, looking to the future, we're going to talk a few minutes about a MACV project that we spoke about last year. We have deliberately gone slow because of the pandemic. It is time for us to take some small steps forward in that process. And I need you to have a feel for what we're looking at so that if the very beginning is not where you want to go, then we need to back up before we commit to anything on this path, because a lot of time and resources can be wasted if we don't. So we're going to dump a lot of information into your hands. We're going to do it in 1 hour, Dr. Hale.
Yes, sir.
Which means 2 people have to go after you. And we're going to do it very quickly. And
And of course, though, please feel free to interrupt, during the course of the discussion or the information, because I want us to, make sure that we have your input and understanding of what the path of. These are two big things that are going to be going on sort of at the same time in our district. By far the two largest things that have happened since I've been here. But we're not going to complain about it because we've been given an opportunity like none other. I sent you an email giving you an idea of the money that we would be receiving. All I said was it was going to be significantly more than the first round. The first round was $2.3 million. If you recall, think in terms of 4 times that.
Wow.
Now, it's got to carry us all the way until September 2023.
Yes.
So we've got to absorb pandemic needs up to September of 2023. But good stewardship our district has shown in the past is going to allow us to do some significant technology improvements and to take on the one-to-one initiative. Not only that, it's going to help us with some other long-term needs in the district. So this will be just a starter. So, Dr. Hale, with that, I'm sorry I had to interrupt before you started, but I wanted to do all my introductory as we can.
Thank you for those introductory remarks, Dr. Gillen. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I'm excited to bring to you some information dealing with the technology that we want to introduce into the classroom. As you know, each one of you have a device in front of you. So you know the effect that technology has had in the workplace as we collaborate and communicate with each other. So the reason we need to do this, Dr. Gillen's kind of done a good job of that, but we need to individualize the instruction, increase our student engagement, improve equity. Dr. Gillen talks a lot about equity, and that will mean one device per student, which is most frequently a Google Chromebook. All right, this slide just gives you a little bit of the past. If you want to peruse that, it just shows you what we did back in 15, 16, all the way up to now. So for this year, we are putting in some new switches. And then this Abbeville money you see in front of you, as well as the K-12 Technology Special Fund, that money's gone away now. But we did make use of that. That's when we first filed with the Abbeville money. We bought our first 700 to 800 Lenovo laptops. So for this transition year, we're also going to do some more switch installation in all 16 schools, which is major. You need to get these type of switches in to support the infrastructure that is going to be facing us with all the Chromebooks. And for fiscal year 21-22, even though we won't be funded until next year, I wanted to at least tell you that we are looking at a new wireless overlay for our 16 schools. So a little quick recap. We have a wired and a wireless overlay. We have upgraded our core switches. We now have a 5 gigabit connection out to the internet with circuit upgrades to accommodate this bandwidth. At the beginning of the 2021 school year, I remember calling Dr. Gill and said, we've got to also upgrade our circuits. So we went from 250 to 500 meg on that. And we still have access points in the district, of course, for wireless, but those will be changed out from Aruba to Meraki. And we also have some at PLC, Ruby Ops, and the DO, but we can't buy those through E-rate funds. Those go directly to the schools. Okay. This next slide.
Question.
Yes.
Everything that we talked about so far has been with the district E-rate money that we got in Abbeville money, right?
Yes, pretty much. You can't increase the bandwidth with that, but most everything, yes, sir.
So the E-rate 21, 22 that you're talking about, this is what we expecting to happen with the new round of E-rate money?
Yes, sir. Our E-rate consultant's already working on that, and that RFP will go out. Mr. Wayne Wallace will be a part of that. And any funds for that will not be issued until that 21-22 school year.
If I can remember straight, when we had this fee rate money, the last time we had to match it, and we got,
Yes, sir, we did.
and so was we, what's the matching, this thing?
We built that into our overall technology plan. If you recall, it's a 3-year rolling, so we have the match in place.
But the good news is, Dr. Goodwin, is that we could get some of that match back. We've been participating in that for a few years already, and then I think the feds are gonna step in for that school year as well.
Either way, money and the money that we're talking about from stimulus is two different pots, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
Okay? All right, just to give you a picture of these are desktops now. You know, every teacher wants a desktop on their desk as well as staff. But you see that we are out of warranty in a lot of those. We've got some as old as 10 years old on down. So we have 170 that are coming in soon, but we still don't have a ship date on that. All right, but that's just to show you the number of desktops out there and the age on them.
That's your question.
Yes.
No, there's different amounts of numbers there. Why do we have such different ranges of numbers each time you borrow them? Like, you know, 1 year's 572, then you went down to 253, you went back to 261.
That was the money we had that year, Chairman Miles, to buy desktops. We have a technology bond that Brad could speak more to, but we have 3 years on that. So that's why I only have 170, because that bond money was running out on the last.
That's what.
Yes, sir.
So we didn't have enough money to get them the 170 this year.
That's correct.
And is that money through so many years, or what? I mean, what's that money? I mean, I'm trying to understand why it went down to 170. We sell a technology bond every 3 years. It's approximately
750,000.
about 750,000. Excuse me, 750,000. So that is a 3-year program. You can spend it earlier, later, depending on what your needs are. What we try to do is target labs and rotate our schools and change what we can at a school. So we don't just, you know, we have to budget that money to last those 3 years.
I guess my question I have, the computers that we have, are these purchased or we do a lease agreement?
Oh, no lease agreements.
And why not lease agreement?
In
Mr. Willard?
most cases, unless we can find a operational lease contract, which usually gets into a bond issuance to do so, those are not, say, an equipment acquisition lease. Those are not as well known as they once were. Part of the reason is because the cost of financing has gone up so much. Typically, you're better off buying the device and then recycling that device and getting some funds off of that versus paying the lease fee per year. We were finding it on the few devices we did for career and technology, that lease fee per year was running $25,000 to $30,000, and that was several fewer devices than what we're talking about here.
And actually, I do like the fact we didn't just buy a whole bunch at one time just because of the life of it.
Question also, Dr. Hill.
Yes, sir.
Being that we have quite a few still like 572 and 8 years, 253, 6, and then do we have a projection to try to get most of them updated?
Yes, with the new bond, we'll have additional funds for that, right? Mr. Willard?
Not a good question.
He was asking, how are we going to replace the ones that are aging out on us, out of warranty?
Well, I think that's part of the plan. The cyclical bond, the 3-year bond is certainly not enough to touch many of these, but this is where the stimulus dollars come into play. But we're gonna be doing that in more bulk than we would as far as versus spreading it out.
So in other words, in 3 years, we're gonna have most of them on bid, in a sense.
I don't know that.
And it's because what I'm asking is that with that many, you only placing one 170 at this time. I don't know how many would be in that 10-year or 8-year range, but for the next 3 years, you're gonna see many of them somewhere again, 8, 9, 10 years old. So listen, then we have a projection on getting most of them. That's what I.
Well, and Mr. Coleman, we're on the last year of the 3-year cycle of the 750,000. So next year, when y'all do bonds, at the end of this year, we'll have the 750 again. So that will allow us to tackle that big chunk that's coming up.
Last question.
And I got,
Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah.
Dees.
yeah, my question is, with us going to 1-to-1 where all our children are gonna have a device, how many of these desktops are gonna be pulled out? I mean, do we still need everything in there, or are these administrative machines, or are we gonna be able to do away with a lot of that?
I feel like we can do away with some, Mr. Dusa. However, most administrators still want a desktop as well as labs. I've tried putting in some of the smaller Lenovo's in a few CTE labs, but then they're ready to get back that desktop that they had.
I got you. Okay.
Okay.
And mine's gonna be brief and actually follow stuff with this looking at the way technology is growing, looking at how the classroom is expanding out, become more virtual. Should we still continue to have the desktop compared to laptops, Chromebooks, that kind of thing? Because now that's all I have at the school, they're teaching laptops. And obviously I take my laptop home and teach my class
Yeah.
on the laptop.
I think the number will go down with time. I really do. But, in an office setting, we really just have the small Lenovo's.
Right.
Sometimes you just, you just need a bigger screen and, a little more power, I guess. But yes, I can see the number going down. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Also want to give you a report on the Chromebooks. Okay, so as you remember, we were fortunate enough through our partnership with Bridge Tech to secure the reconditioned Chromebooks from Spartanburg 1. So on your screen, you see the current Chromebooks in use now are about 3810, or either in use or in inventory. So we have a lot in inventory now because more virtual students came back face to face. But those Chromebooks are going to be picked up, like I said, at the end of June. Hotspots provided by the state in use and inventory for 1,853, but in that service at least goes through June 2021. That may be looked at again at some point, but right now that's what we know is June, which is this coming June. Technology in the classrooms is essential for a successful learning environment. We've mentioned that. Downtime is not optional. Currently, our department, the IT department, of whom I'm very proud of, and they give time, they're very passionate about their jobs. We can't handle really what we have now. That doesn't even go, that excludes 1-to-1. So, yes, I'm going to show you that you are thinking ahead. I'm going to get to that in just a second, Ms. Burke. So a lot of times we have to be reactionary to issues, which leaves no time for best practices and preventative maintenance. give you a good example of that in just a second. All right, here we go. Also aging out are our Promethean active boards. So what we want to do is replace them with a panel like you're seeing here. We'd like to give every teacher one. And right now, Dr. Gill was able to put a lot in for us this past year, but we still need 290 for every teacher to have one of these panels. And, I'm sorry, Mr. Sweeney? Okay.
The other one is, the other activity board is not workable or what, it's not functional.
Yes, I mean, they're very time consuming to fix. It takes up a lot of a technician's time to fix those boards. They are old. Okay?
They're 10 years plus.
Yes. And, you know, outside of the bond that Mr. Willard mentioned, the opportunities to refresh our computers is not consistent. So they're very limited for us. And Dr. Gilman has mentioned to you the crypto mining breach that we had, all right? So with more and more threats like that, we really need dedicated personnel to monitor our network and develop and promote policies to keep up with industry trends. But the good thing that came out of that was that we updated our Microsoft server and workstation vulnerabilities level to the newest versions. We patched to the newest level our firewall. We enhanced that application, the filtering capabilities of it by blocking applications that are vulnerable to security breaches. We learned of a new security software by the name of Carbon Black that can locate and mitigate those vulnerabilities on servers and workstations by looking at the behavior patterns and empowering those defenders to detect and stop those attacks. But what it did bring, it brought to light the need for additional personnel to be able to do these types of things without having to stop and do it because we had to do it, okay? So we're actually going to have a call this week with that company to talk about you having to maybe use Carbon Black for a while now. All right, this next slide just shows you not so much on the career and tech side of my hat that I wear, but we have 4 full-time support staff. You know, that's your network engineers and your technicians. I have 1 student information system administrator, that's your power school administrator. I now have 1 technology integration specialist. The position that would enhance the administrator for power school, that position is currently vacant. We do have a temporary person that has come in for a few days a week, and she's phenomenal, and so I'm not throwing off on her. She's doing a great job. And then we have 2 contracted employees when we partnered with Bridge Tech on bringing in the Chromebooks. Any questions on that?
Dr. Hill, if I
Yes.
could mention
Yes.
the student information system administrator and the student information system specialist, that's how we get all of our funding. Their job is to make sure that we capture by how students are coded, what they're taking, how they're enrolled in our school district. Those are the ones who generate all of our state funding. Well, actually, they touch on federal funding
Yes,
too.
they do.
So I mean, those 2 positions are mission critical. The reason it's scary carrying the vacant position that we're carrying right now, especially with COVID, is if that system administrator goes down, we don't have a backup. Those are very specialized skills, and we don't have a backup right now.
So what you just mentioned, Dr. Goodwin, brings us to the next slide. Without that person, the administrator, then we have a single point of failure right there. Okay. And on that slide, mentions the things Dr. Buell just shared, touched on those that Power School person is responsible for. And those data collections and state reporting tie back to funding for us. So you can read that. The full-time IT support staff at the very top, they support our organization from top to bottom, county-wide, every aspect of technology from the classroom to the server room. 4 people are responsible for over 6,000 computers, 100+ servers, hundreds of network switches, routers, security, firewall, filtering. The contractors we brought in to handle the Chromebook support have been, I'm telling you, we couldn't have, if we'd have handpicked them ourselves, which we have a hand in as well, but they are doing the provisioning of the Chromebooks, repair, distribution, collection, Google Suite, software support, asset management, reporting, hotspot support. And so they supplement right now my full-time IT support staff. When we had the breach, one of them was here at that time and was very helpful. The technology integration specialist down on the right is part of the e-learning readiness pilot, the 9th grade honors cohort, and she does Google Classroom training, and Ms. Folsom will talk a little bit more about that. So what I did was I looked at a couple of districts that often are mentioned that tend to be like us, all right? So the first one on the left, even though Kershaw County's got more students, more students and employees there, I still wanted to use them. So you'll see what they have currently in their department. All right, I'm not going to read all those to you.
And they are our mentor district.
They are.
In the e-learning group.
Right, absolutely. And then Newberry County, they have, less students than us, but they have more people doing the job that our staff is having to do at this point. They also do something with teacher tech leaders in each school that I thought was very interesting, and paid a $3,000 stipend for that. All right, and so this is my last slide. Just brainstorming a little bit with a few members of my team as the executive director of IT and career and tech. Notice I have added an IT manager in there below me, and then we would still be using, a lot of our own people. It's our job as administrators to figure out how we make these changes, all right? But that's just something that this is nothing in stone. We're just looking at what we do. And we thought a technology, maybe a technician in each of the 4 areas would be helpful. And that would free up some of our engineers to do more of the firewall support, patches, that kind of thing, to keep our network safe.
Question.
Yes.
You're presently with 9 employees with contractors. And with your proposed plan, you are saying add on another 4, as if it was 13.
I think it's 12. Is it 12? Yeah, and the help desk down there possibly could be added to another position, but we don't have, like, a lot of districts have a help desk person, maybe at certain hours of the day.
That's still not worked out, but the way most people approach this in the state is not by necessarily hiring people through contracted services like we do with Bridge Tech now. You build it into your cost of the devices so that you have the support already built in for the period of time that you use the devices. And that's what we did with the reconditioned units as we built the service into that particular contract.
Year implemented, to be implemented,
Excuse me?
year to be implemented.
Has to be next year if we're gonna put all these devices in kids' hands. We can't just pass out devices and hope for the best.
We are currently what the EOC is calling an e-learning readiness district. We have not applied to be a readiness district because we did not have one-to-one devices. But we were contacted by the Education Oversight Committee and asked if we would consider being an e-learning readiness district. So we agreed. We were very honest and told them that we did not apply because we did not feel like we qualified. But they wanted us to be part of this e-learning readiness district. You'll look and see that the number of student devices available for take-home was one of our problems. We didn't really have the technology software or the resources or professional development plan in place to be able to qualify. We do have the technology infrastructure, but we were very concerned about home internet availability for our students. You'll see here some of those challenges. The professional learning, being able to develop consistency in our online course delivery. Our teachers don't have the skills to teach online at this point. We've got to develop our professional learning to support those teachers. Our goals are to utilize technology intentionally and strategically. Can't see my words there. To provide effective instruction. Improve instructional practices by providing and modeling personalized professional learning opportunities and emphasizing collaboration as the key factor in building collective efficacy. And increase student achievement as measured by the profile of the South Carolina graduate in college and or career readiness of students upon graduation. Our core beliefs. We believe that teacher effectiveness is increased by participating in high quality professional learning and receiving meaningful and focused feedback on the delivery of instructional practices. An intentional focus on the refinement of instructional practice and collaboration among teachers increases student achievement. That is our goal, student achievement. So we've got to provide the professional learning to create the teacher efficacy so that student achievement increases. Here is a chart that shows you the total number of students in grades 3rd through 12th grade. This is showing where we are as far as what we've ordered. We have 3684 Chromebooks that are due as of right now, February of 21. We've also submitted to finance a purchase requisition for an additional 3,110 Chromebooks for a total of right at 7,000 Chromebooks. You'll look down at the bottom, we would need approximately 700 Chromebooks for teachers. And right now, our teachers don't even have a device in their hand that they can take home to work on lessons. Now, we have been able to provide devices for our teachers that are teaching virtually right now. They are a little ahead of the curve as far as learning how to teach virtually. To do this effectively, we've got to have instructional support. We've got to be able to provide the professional learning for our teachers. We feel that we would need technology instructional specialists or technology integration specialists, as well as technology teacher leaders at each of our schools to be able to provide the support that our teachers and administrators would need in this one-to-one initiative. We feel like we need a digital learning plan developed to implement a one-to-one initiative. The State Department has provided some resources for us. One of those is the Learning Object Repository. They love the acronyms. It is a LOR. It will be basically a housing ground for all kinds of resources, lesson plans, digital videos. It is all part of Discovery Education as part of the LOR. The South Carolina Department of Education is also providing a learning management system for every district. We were able to choose ours, and we have chosen Canvas. We are in the process of getting all of that uploaded, and it is in our single sign-on system now. In fact, we have a few of our teachers right now that have had experience with Canvas that are actually using it. We have not asked our teachers to go through training at this point. We felt like with the pandemic and what they were dealing with virtual learning and different ways we were having to learn this year, that we felt like we were better off to hold off on training with Canvas. We will roll out Canvas in the summertime to our teachers. We've been using Google Classroom because they were more familiar with that. But Canvas is ready, and it's loaded and ready to roll out to our teachers when we have the plan in place. We do have a single sign-on solution that is ClassLink. When each of our students pulls up the district, that is their landing page on their Chromebooks. They have all kinds of applications that will take them straight to what they need for learning. We do currently have one technology instructional specialist or a technology integration specialist. She is supporting all of our schools, all 16 schools, with our virtual school. She's also supporting a small cohort of teachers and students at each high school that received new Chromebooks. We had 209 Chromebooks that we purchased, and we are having her work with that cohort of teachers to help them use those Chromebooks for blended learning. Those students are the students that participated in English 1 and Algebra 1 in the 8th grade. So when they went to 9th grade, they are getting English 2 through a blended learning model, as well as Algebra 2. She also is our Google expert for the district, and she has been supporting all of our virtual teachers with Google Classrooms. She's also our Canvas, which is our learning management system. She's also our contact for Canvas implementation. Here is an organizational chart that will show you that what we would like to be able to have is a technology instructional specialist for each of our attendance areas. So that would be 4 of those positions. We would be asking for 3 additional ones, as well as having a teacher technology leader in each school that would be just a regular classroom teacher, but she would receive a stipend, and she would receive 5 additional days in the summer for training. Tammy, I think this is your slide. What does this show?
Let me ask you a question then.
Yes, sir.
Since we was contacted to be a part of this process, I'm assuming that they put dollars up for us to be a part of it.
They did not offer us any money, but they are offering us support and training. Of course, the State Department is providing money for our learning management system. They are also providing this learning object repository, which is a resource as well. But as far as the Education Oversight Committee, they have not offered us any dollars, so to speak, but training and support. They did offer us a mentor district. We are working with Kershaw. We've got questions. They're also a Canvas district. They matched us based on geographically, but as well as what we had resources wise.
Question I have. Right now, students that are face-to-face, they're face-to-face by choice or because we don't have order between Chromebooks or whatever.
We are very fortunate that we do have enough Chromebooks for all that want to be virtual. We were able to provide any student that wanted a Chromebook and wanted to be virtual a Chromebook. We had quite a number come back face-to-face just because I think that mode of instruction was not working well for those students, and they chose to come back face-to-face, but it was not because of a lack of resource as far as the Chromebook.
So right now, hypothetically, every child went to go virtual. We don't have soft phone.
So if we wanted to, we're just shy of 7,000 students. We do not have 7,000 devices to send home at this point.
As a reminder, Dr. Chapman, those devices we currently have serving virtual students go back to Spartanburg One.
Yeah, they're borrowed devices.
And that's what we're talking about, buying the new ones. We're gonna have to eventually send those back.
In June, yes, sir.
This slide shows the benefits of one-to-one devices. Is there anything more you want to say to
I
that?
just wanted to say, we have a great resource with Nicole Gulledge at Chesterfield High School. I just asked her to put together a little flyer, just to show you guys maybe what, the social media piece of it could look like. And, so I thought she did a great job with that. I just wanted to put that up there because we'll need to advertise and make parents feel comfortable, bring them in for meetings,
And I guess the last question I have, and I'm trying to push y'all past the hour. Students getting the training and staff getting the training is great. Will the parents be able to get some training?
Yes, and I think on one of my slides, I did mention that part of those technology integration specialists, as well as the school technology leaders, would be available for parent training as well, because that's a big piece in training the parents in what instruction looks like in blended learning or on what we call a learn from home day. All of those things need to be communicated to parents.
And, this is to be implemented 21-22 in school year.
Yes, sir, that is our goal.
I mean, and this will be basically like what we talked about earlier.
Well, financial impact, obviously, for just devices is in those numbers that I gave you earlier. You'll be there. We have to figure out how to support the devices as far as maintenance and implementation of those devices. And again, we also have to figure out how we're going to support our teachers. You can't have a more close-up example than the one you live with. And to have watched her this year have to change complete modes of teaching, and she is technology adept, but she was not prepared for online learning in the nature that it is. And so it's a learning on the fly. If it was not for her technology integration specialist, who she can go to and say, I'm having problem A, walk me through how to deal with this. And she would be at a standstill on what she could do for students.
So then on this slide, the staff that you have here, you basically have these technology instruction specialists right now. What we're talking about here is actually 16 teachers, tech leaders. Is that correct?
We currently have one technology instructional
So 3
specialist.
more plus 16 tech.
Correct, and those 16 would be regular teachers in the classroom that would just be adding a stipend.
Okay.
Are we gonna have difficulty getting all these devices in for y'all to get them set up? Cause I know y'all had a hard time. Have we even gotten the other shipment that we were expecting in yet? And is that gonna be real short timing there?
Yeah, it originally was October. It has been moved out all the way to February at this point.
And just as we're getting a significant amount of ESSER II money, think about every school district in the United States is getting a scale like we're getting. They're getting that scale of 4 times as much. So the demand worldwide for devices is going to be incredible. That's one reason why they've already put in the purchase requisition, is so that we can get in line.
So with the requisition that's in, it would bring us up to 7,000.
Yes, sir, it would.
Well, as long as the other ones, they've been on order since last January. You
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then go down to our financial update. Willie.
Good evening, members of the board. I'll speak briefly about those. I'll use that to transition in. As you'll see, this does not say budget update. 2021, there's not much information, so we're going to do a financial update this evening, but we're not going to get in depth about the ESSER 1 and the ESSER 2 monies tonight. I want to talk about those briefly to reiterate the difficulties on getting devices, since we're focusing somewhat on the technology side. It's going to be very difficult to get those in a short lead time. It's just not going to be possible. The state of South Carolina alone received $940 million in ESSER 2. That's big up. So it's 4 times per district. So it's going to be very difficult for us to get those on site in a reasonable amount of time. We're going to hope for the best and do the best that we can to do that. So I caution you on being too, I guess being looking for this in the near future. We want to implement as much as we can at 21-22, but it's going to be very, very difficult for us to be in that one-to-one setting at that time. So from a financial standpoint, again, when we put in our spending plan for ESSER 1, we knew that we were going to be spending those things on sanitation, cleaning supplies, health, safety, as well as technology. There are a few other things mixed in there. I would have gotten more in depth in this presentation. However, with the developments of ESSER 2 and the new stimulus bill, that is causing us to go back and rethink our spending plan on ESSER 1, because we have so much more flexibility when it comes to the second stimulus bill. So we're not going to get in depth on that, but the ESSER monies will come into play when I show you some financial updates or a mid-year update a little bit later on. So here are a few things we'll look at tonight. We'll look at our historical data, so you have some reminders of where we've been, where we are. We'll look at a mid-year review and a comparison. We're going to talk about the step increase that was frozen. Talk about enrollment trends due to the pandemic. And then we'll look at the legislative calendar and what's ahead. So several slides very quickly, just a reminder of where we are, what we use as estimates for our millage values for budgeting purposes. And these are general. They do fluctuate some from year to year, depending on what happens with the property valuations. But that's our debt service and operations that we use for rough estimates. And keep in mind for operations that we have to take out the owner-occupied 4% property under Act 388. Historical millage, as you know, we did not increase millage for 2021 under the continuing resolution. So we retained the millage rates as we did in 1920. And that just gives you the history.
Did we have a reevaluation this year?
The reassessment took place as of I want to say that was a 2019 reassessment. You go a year back, I think that's right. And it showed much less growth than the reassessment did from 5 years ago. So we did not have a need, and I think we mentioned that in a previous board meeting that there was not a calculated need to do a rollback. So for the 2021 year, there was an available increase under statewide growth, but we did not bring that before you due to the continuing resolution. But that just reminds you, gives you some history of what actions we have taken. Debt service, since we're talking about the funding of capital projects, wanted to show you where we are. We're about the same as where we have been. In the 2020 year, our maximum debt limit, about $10.5 million. That is the maximum debt we can issue within a year if needed. Under that 10.6 million, 7.5 million is our available debt capacity, meaning that we could issue that amount without having to go to voters for referendum. That is the 8% capacity. So we utilize those funds for our SCAGO program, refinancing of bonds for the debt capacity that we have facilitates our payments on existing bonds and the annual tax anticipation. Love this slide. Going back roughly 7 years to the end of 2013, showing the principal and interest and the total bond obligations that were outstanding and where we stood at the end of the audit. We were about half, and we've gone from 9 different general obligation bonds to 5. And you can certainly see that how the interest portion especially has come way down. Our financial advisors and counsel has done a great job promoting us to refinance based on market rates. So that's a great illustration of a job well done by everybody in this room for our bond obligations. So general fund budget, again, there's the history. Tells quite a story from where we've been, going back to other stimulus periods that are, if you look back on it, not too dissimilar from where we are now. Certainly not quite the dollars we're looking at now, but no change from the 1920 to the 21 year as far as total general fund budget. Just some history on our fund balance changes. Obviously, we're projecting the same as we had in the 1920 budget, but we do not foresee, as you'll see later on, trending towards using that type of fund balance. Wanted you to be aware that the pension reform that was put into place back in the 17-18 year is still in place. However, the 2021 additional contribution by employers has been suspended. But what that does is it adds another year on the back. So that instead of ending in 2023, in 24, we anticipate the cost of that to be about the same. All right. I want to give you some statistics on how we compare under the continuing resolution with last year. At the same time, looking at the periods of July 1st through December 31st. The first 2 slides are going to show you all funds. First slide is expenses. The next one is revenues. So 100s and 200s, those salaries and fringe objects. You will notice that there is an increase of 580,000 and 188,000 respectively on those categories. Don't panic on those, because those are minimal impacts from actual increases. You would expect under a continuing resolution, we would be fairly close to where we were. But just remember back to the summer when we were mandated to do the ARC and the LEAP programs. That increased our salary expenses and our fringe expenses, but those were covered by federal funds. So you're going to see the increase on both the expenses and the revenues. Purchase services, pretty good size increase there, 457,000. Keep in mind again, the impacts of ESSER and the coronavirus relief funds. You have expenses in there for our portion of the learning management system that we purchased, as well as technology services to roll out the devices we had. Again, receive funding for those. Supplies and materials, would call that a pretty normal change within $200,000 to $300,000. But again, keep in mind that we had to come out of pocket for safety supplies, custodial supplies that were not provided by the state, and some additional technology expenses. Those were split costs, but the majority of those were covered by federal funds. Capital outlay, this is an expected change. $173,000 is within reason, because those changes are going to be based on when projects are complete. We started a project, we have no idea if it's going to be completed by the end of the year, so it carries to another year. And then the other categories for dues, fees, taxes, and then our transfers, all of that is within reason on expenses. So $1.7 million difference is not something that I'm concerned about due to the additional funding, which is reflected here on the revenue. Don't panic when you see that the local is a difference of $1.5 million, meaning $1.5 million less as of December, because the sales tax was recorded earlier in the previous year than it was in this year. But the sales tax is still there and it's still helping. As well as, you got to remember, interest on investments is lower and our Medicaid claims are down. So when you put sales tax in there, that's going to bring that back into reason. So don't worry about that one line item alone. Intergovernmental, local agency partnerships, that is normal. State revenue, right there in the middle. Please do not see that big number of $2.1 billion increase as an increase in funding. Obviously, we're under a continuing resolution. That is not an increase in funding. That is where we have already booked our deferred revenues and carryovers from prior year. So those monies are available this year. They just simply show up as revenue a little bit earlier than they normally would in the year. And that just gives you some idea of how much we had to carry over from the prior year because of the pandemic. And we're very gracious to the state's programs that allowed that additional carryover from actually 2 years ago. Federal increase, this is normal. I will say that on federal funds this year, there's about $500,000 that were claimed this time last year that have not been claimed this year simply because our state and the feds are behind as well due to the pandemic. So no reason to panic. A $1.7 million increase on expenses for a 1.4 or 1.5 increase on revenue is certainly reasonable. Just a quick look at general fund. I'm not going to go through all the categories again one by one, but you can see under the continuing resolution, when we just focus this in on general fund, all of those numbers come back to reason, meaning they're not changing a whole lot. Your salary and fringe is always going to go up some because you have upgrades or you have changes in fringe costs because of the plans that folks elect. But we are saving money on the purchase services and on the supplies and materials on the general fund side because we have the federal dollars to handle some of those. And let's face it, we're not traveling. There's not a lot of things happening that would happen in a normal year. So we are saving in those categories. So general fund expenses are down a reasonable amount that I would expect. And then on the flip side, the general fund revenue is up just a little bit because of state funds that we're receiving on that side. Again, don't panic on the local number because it is not reflective of some things that were booked earlier in the 1920 year versus current year. Any questions on those? Again, not getting into the whole ESSER or the stimulus monies, but wanted to give you reassurance that we are trending very similar to where we were in the prior year, and that we will have flexibilities under all of the stimulus monies we're receiving to relieve some of our expenses where we can on the general fund, and we'll continue tracking this and give you updates as we go. Any questions on that?
Actually, one question, the stimulus money, the 2.3 million, do you know what we have spent on that money so far?
The first round of stimulus money, we would have spent that on custodial. And when I say custodial, that's anything from plexiglass, like what you see in front of you, or other types of plexiglass, disinfectant sprays, sprayers for our schools, those types of things that were not provided or funded by the state, given to us by the state without cost, let me put it that way. Part of that was the learning management system that was our portion of the cost with, the name slips my mind, Canvas. And then we have a substantial amount encumbered against devices that we are waiting to be delivered. So we will, we can certainly shoot you a detailed list if you'd like for us to, but it's going to be safety, disinfectant, and devices.
So yes, and everybody the other day where we at, what we spending and what's left, just kind of where we at.
Sure, we can do that. All right, I want to talk to you about House Bill 3609, which is current legislation being proposed to address the teacher salary step that was missed as far as the credit from the 1920 year that would normally be in the 2021 budget. So it would be for the 1920 credit. It was frozen for the 2021 budget. All districts are told that they were not allowed to give a step. So that is not yet accounted for in our budget under the continuing resolution. Keep in mind that any legislative bill addresses only eligible teachers and PCS codes, not classified or administrative or other staff categories. There's still a lot of uncertainty about the calculation for districts funding, because this is happening or being proposed as a mid-year catch-up. It would be calculated in a little bit of a different way. So we're still waiting on some details regarding that. So if you'll just bear with us, we will give you more details as we know those. We are of the impression that we are not going to be providing information for those calculations to happen, but rather that the Department of Revenue and Fiscal Affairs and those state agencies will be handling that. Since this is a change to a proviso of not permanent law, they can release funding. They have said out of the emergency reserve fund is what they're planning on doing. They can release it in current year, and they can mandate us to pay the step in the current year, even though it's not prorated. And we are being told right now that the expectation would be to pay a lump sum payment no later than June 15th of 2021. Now, a couple of comments on that. Obviously, we've got to have some discussions administratively to bring to you a recommendation regarding the teacher salary step, not really a recommendation since it's going to be a mandate, but what do we do about all other classifications of staff? You're possibly looking at a situation, if we don't address that, you're going to have one classification that's one step ahead of another going into a budget year. My point is, these things get very complicated when they're handled like this. We have folks who have had upgrades during the year. You have individuals who may or may not qualify for the step based on the number of days they worked in 1920. So it gets very complicated when we look at these scenarios. So if you will, please bear with us, and we'll keep you updated. We do feel like this will go through very swiftly. Dr. Goodwin, I haven't heard any other news on it, but we do feel like this will go through very swiftly, and that we will be learning more about funding and implementation very quickly.
But you telling us that based on this bill, that it might be that they mandate a lump sum payment from the district.
To teachers, correct. There's no might be, it'll have to be a lump sum. We can't prorate it at this point because it goes back to July 1st.
That bill hasn't paid, and that's what's on the table right now.
Correct.
Yeah, the, last Monday, lead senators were saying that the bill was dead on arrival coming from the House. By Thursday, it was how quick can the House get it over to us to pass it?
The mechanics are not funding the worker.
This bill was disposed this week.
Excuse me.
In the past, this is supposed this week.
Rough numbers, teacher salary side of the step's gonna be probably $500,000 worth of the step. And that's given a little bit of leeway for friends as well.
You're speaking of everything.
And that's just the teacher portion.
Okay.
And that's all that they would consider funding. Nothing to change on those. So one big impact from the pandemic has been the what enrollments or our average daily memberships look like. So I wanted to touch real quick on what's happening statewide and what's going on in our district. Statewide impact, 2019-20 year, at the 45-day count, the state-weighted pupil units were about $995,000. 45-day count, 2021, $965,000. The reduction, students, sorry, I said dollars twice, didn't I? 995,000 weighted pupil units. Those are not actual head counts. Those are the weighted units from the ADM. But there's a $30,000 count reduction from 1920 to 2021. What that tells you is we don't worry so much about funding being spread thin and us being capped on the current base student cost, but that is not a very good trend. So what does it look like for the district? 1920, our ADM was 6730. 2021 ADM, 6611. Which translates to weighted pupil units in 1920 of 9411 and 2021 9196. Seeing this very similar trend across all districts, obviously, with those statewide numbers. Keep in mind that virtual school in and of itself does not impact this, meaning the children we have in a virtual program does not impact this. We suffer reductions when there are students who go to a K-12 online charter that's not affiliated with the district. For instance, go to the Erskine charter. There are several examples that fall under that category, or any other state charter that is not affiliated, or homeschool programs. So there's a few normal year-to-year fluctuations in those changes, but the most of that is those who chose not to come back face-to-face or enroll in one of our virtual programs.
So the 119 students that we lost their basically they enrolled in another school.
It's not a head count of students, but you lose funding for the reduction in ADM, the average daily membership. So, yes.
Well, this would be more for the population of the province. Just kind of increase.
I've seen two different estimations just recently, and nothing from the census. I do not know it. And we don't want to even talk about the two populations we've seen.
Okay.
So as far as legislative, the schedule really only goes through the House deliberations at this point. We do not know exactly what the Senate schedule is going to be. So that is for your reference to know what's going to be going on at any given date over the next couple of months. Any other questions? All right.
We'll go down to our next one. Okay. We're going to talk just a few minutes about the McPhee area facility sketches and estimates. We brought to you some discussions last very early spring, about some things that were going on in McPhee, and we want to update you on that. I will tell you that while you'll see an architect's name on these plans, we've not engaged an architect. We're not that far along. This was a architect who had done work at McPhee before, who had access to McPhee drawings and files, that could quickly pull this together as a conceptual view of what we might do. These are not working drawings. This is not detailed. This just gives you an idea of what we could do. Remember, the considerations where schools aren't what they used to be. We have a lot of other things in schools. We talked about computer labs. And quite honestly, in the early 2000s, we weren't testing with computers. We weren't testing online. There was a lot of things happening. There are a lot of things happening in schools today. We did not have any ELL students to speak of in the school. We didn't have classes for those. Also, special education requirements have expanded, as well as gifted and talented. So it's not just enrollment. But as you heard from Mr. Willard, enrollment is an interesting thing, because the smaller an attendance area is, the more touchy the fluctuations are. If we gain enrollment, we can literally gain enrollment 10 students in an elementary school, and if 5 of those students happen to be in 4th grade, 5 of them have to be in 5th grade, we might have to split a 4th and 5th grade class, which means we have to add 2 teachers, which means we have to have 2 rooms. So it really makes it harder the smaller you are to handle this. We did see a decrease in enrollment trend, just like we saw in the district. We saw it in the McPhee attendance zone. Now, don't shudder when you see that McPhee Elementary dropped all the way to 335. Remember, we moved a whole grade out of that school. So, that impacted that. Plainview, you see, is up just a little bit. We believe that could partially be because of COVID and people wanting a smaller school setting, and they chose to transfer their students to Plainview. McPhee High, also by the same token, remember, it's going up, but it's going up because we moved the 6th grade to their site. But you see that the overall trend, just like it was statewide, is going down. We're being told to expect that rebound to take 2 years. That what will happen is as we get through the pandemic, we will see the other side, and what will happen is these folks who have chosen to go to online charters will come back to us, and that we should be planning on them returning, because people will begin to feel more comfortable with their students in the normal public school setting. And I believe that's true. Just to remind you the things we did to get through this year, we relocated the 6th grade from McPhee Elementary to McPhee High, which freed up some very, very needed space at McPhee Elementary. We were really out of space there. We transferred the appropriate personnel from one school to the other. And to do that, over at the high school, we had a room that had been partitioned for 2 smaller rooms. We needed a full-size room, so we removed the partition in that room and opened that back up. So that was a couple of quick fixes to get through the next few years while we move forward. Now, the recommendations, after reviewing all of the information and then working with the architect, and when you first look at this, you'll say, well, golly, we've already got art, music, and computer classes at McPhee Elementary. But you're gonna see in a minute why the recommendation is to do new art, music, and computer classes. Then you would go back and retrofit the current art, music, and computer classes to be special use early childhood classrooms. The reason for that is the new addition would go on the opposite end of the building from where the early childhood students are. The art, music, and computer labs are right with the early childhood classes. So if we renovated those, that keeps your grade bands together. You certainly would not want to put your kindergarten students over on the hall with your fifth grade. So that's why we would do that. Also, as you grow, you need to look at your support space. One of the spaces that's very small at the elementary is the cafeteria. So we're also looking at a potential of a 96-seat addition at the cafeteria. McBee High School is a little more straightforward. Just the addition of 4 classrooms in the middle school section of the building should take care of the needs there. Now, to dig in just a minute on the McBee Elementary school additions, if you look up at the top, on the far left end, now, when you're looking at the buildings from the road, that's the far right, because they do configure this north to south. So that's down where the current playground is. The architect conceptually proposes 2 computer labs, a music, and an art room to be put on the end of that wing. You can see to the right a more detailed drawing of those particular rooms, but there still, again, is not much there to take a look at. If you flip over then to the next page, you'll notice that the key area down in the bottom left has a box drawn around the right-hand side now. And that area that's long on the north side of the building is currently art, music, and computer labs along there. What the architect proposed we take a look at is adding the necessary restrooms and other things to those rooms, going in and doing that, turning those into kindergarten or early childhood classrooms, because on the south side of building C is where the other kindergarten classes are. So that puts them all in one wing together. Also, if you look to the far right-hand side, you'll notice the addition to the cafeteria. Now, that's interesting because Mr. Wallace and myself were talking about that's the addition to the addition. Because back in the early 2000s, there was a small addition added to the cafeteria. This would be an addition to the addition. It would just be seated area. It would not be any kind of kitchen or any special use. It's just seating area. And it is to accommodate 96 additional seated students. That, of course, is post-COVID, is the way we would call that. This just gives you a conceptual drawing of what a rendering might look like. Top left, you can actually see the line where the first edition ends and the new edition would start on the cafeteria. Classroom edition would push out into the to the playground. As you come up the drop-off loop there, it would just push that building further down. And then from the back side, that would again show you what the classroom edition would look like. That patio that you see there, that would be the outdoor art area, outdoor art patio for students to go outside and to do artwork, which is certainly the trend to add outdoor patios for art. Any questions on the elementary school? It's pretty quick, really. You're adding 4 classrooms, renovating 4 classrooms, and adding a small cafeteria addition. Over at the high school, you would notice that, again, we would push out toward 151. That is the area that the middle school is now, the middle school students. They're in those 4 classrooms below the new addition. You'll notice that partition wall that we removed in that one room. So that would give you 8 classrooms there, and then going down that hall, down the ramp, for the additional middle school classrooms. So the middle school would now be on an L and would all be together. Obviously, there would be ramp going outside. You would have to put up a barrier wall because you are reasonably close to 151. So you would have to do that. But these are not enhanced classrooms. These are just regular, 4 regular type classrooms I think it's calling for 800 square foot classrooms, if I recall, which is a good sized classroom. We can move straight to the renderings there. You can see the protective wall there. We would probably want to bring that protective wall all the way down just to turn those kids back toward the main building. But that gives you an idea of what it looks like. It would be very easy to blend it architecturally with the school. It would give you that L feeling when you come into the drop-off area up at the front of the building, over there by the curb front of the media center. Now, this is the part that everybody always wants to know. What's it going to cost? The cost estimates that he used were based on a square foot value of $207. The current cost for elementary and middle school and high school additions is averaging $180 a square foot. Because this is considered a small project, they ask you to mark it up 15% if it's a project less than $5 million. So the square footage cost would be $207 per square foot to build these additions. That does not include the additional cost for site improvements, demolition, utilities. They're all different line items. So it's not an all-inclusive cost. Maggie Elementary. To build 4 special use classrooms, art, music, and computer, would be $1.7 million. To renovate and retrofit those 4 current classrooms, actually, I was shocked. This seemed like a deal to me, to be honest, putting in 4 bathrooms and all of the other things, $144,000. And then the addition of the cafeteria seating space would be $351,000, is what the estimate is. Now, when I give you those numbers, those include things like the site work, the demolition, and all of that. He's got all of that line item and figured into the individual costs. Over at the high school, 4 regular sized classrooms come in at $1.022 million. So that means that the total project for all phases would be around $3.2 million, which is quite interesting because when we were ballparking this before we had anybody look at it, we were saying $3.5 or so million to carry out this project. It does come in what you sort of would expect. It's not fancy construction. It's just basic needs construction. Now, the next question always becomes, well, how do you pay for it? Because that's a significant amount of money, and then Mr. Willard goes and throws up a bond of a mill value of 100 and change on capital bonds, and you see it takes a lot of $100,000 to pay for that. In fact, I guess we could finance it out 25, 30 years and get it paid for. But we do have some other capital funds that might be available in the next few years that we could redirect some to help defray that cost significantly. We would need to look at that. Now that we have these numbers, we can go to our bonding folks to take a look at it and to tell us what they feel like the best plan is. No, before we get asked the question, ESSER 2 funds really aren't eligible for this, although ESSER 2 funds might free up other funding that we can do some swaps on to make it there. So you can see that it's pricey to have enrollment growth. You're at best case 2 years out. That also gives you some time. Maybe if we decide to engage a architect to actually go a little deeper into this research project, that gives us a little time to watch next fall and see if that enrollment rebounds. Because if it does, we know we've got to get moving. So not to kick the can down the road, but the good thing about it is right now where the can is, we can handle the load, but we need to be keeping an eye on this. The next steps, if we choose to go forward, would be to put out an RFP for an architect, because we would have to actually engage an architect. Typically, an architect works on a percentage of the cost of the project. that would be one of the factors that they quote bid when they do it. They also, would look at, we would have to look at their experience in school type construction. You also would want to see their experience in finishing projects in a reasonable amount of time. The one thing you don't want to get into is, the architect who has a hard time getting a comprehensive plan, which then takes a lot of change orders to get it across the finish line, because that's an increased cost. And I'm watching Mr. Wiley shake his head because he's lived that nightmare just as I have. So, that would be the next thing. It would not be overly expensive for us to take that step. Now, once we take that step, if we get to the actual bid package, we're making some pretty good commitments once we get to the bid package. But we could certainly move forward with engaging an architect with further plans. We do have capital funds available that we could do that. But like I said, the next steps would be to put out a full RFP for architectural services.
So now we're going to ask our fund attorney first before we do architect, right?
Yeah, we could do both in conjunction because it doesn't cost us anything really to put out an RFP. And so we could actually do both if that's what you wanted to do. But the bonding folks need to weigh in on what we can do to pay for this. And, the hope would be that we could put in a blended financial plan to do this.
We'll go ahead with the architect now, so you're saying 22, 23.
Yeah, we might reasonably be spring of 22. You could begin to get in the ground if you had a good plan in place.
Keep not getting funded and architect.
Yes, sir.
And you need a approval. I know.
Yeah, but we don't have it on the agenda tonight. We would prefer to bring it to you in a regular meeting.
Right.
We only wanted to bring you information tonight. Yeah.
And, Dr. Gill, one thing I think we also want to look into, and I do know the last, school board conference I went to, there was talk about, state and federal funding for private schools, charter schools. I'd like to really kind of get some, update on what's the last information, if there is any new information on how this trend, because then it would open up competition on how we compete with student capital, student growth. But it would also be very important to see if the school will actually start experiencing continued growth like it traditionally did when you have a lower and it comes back traditionally after that year, or with this change in climate in private schools and charter schools being eligible for that state and federal funding, reduced state student population. I agree. I think the downward trend we're experiencing now definitely has to do with the pandemic and the uncertainty. But how that other uncertainty, the decision about what the Fed and the state is going to do with private schools and charter schools.
Yeah, and I certainly agree. And like I say, one thing we're going to be able to see with this timeline, we're not going to have to make a large financial commitment until after we see what even happens next school year. We are in we actually, you hate to say it, pandemic actually came in pretty good timing for this particular need because it gives us a little time.
Yeah, and that's good. I think the time would really help us out in assessing just the whole gamut. I hate to think that public school has to begin to compete with the student population.
Didn't they, this Sacramento Supreme Court just knocked down the state funding of stimulus money for private schools? They just knocked that down. I mean, they just voted that down 2 or 3 weeks ago. Don't you think that was a precedent over the rest of the state and federal money? What are y'all talking about, money administrative on this?
No, sir. I don't think that's going to change anything. That was just that one particular pot of year money, which was federal money given to the governor, that he could not give that money directly. I will tell you that in the second stimulus plan, the ESSER 2, there is money going directly from the feds directly to private schools. So it's not coming through the state, which makes it all legal. I think you're actually going to see a continued trend of charter and, you know, schools and such. Question is, will we see it in Chesterfield County?
Right.
You know, there are counties that are seeing significant impact, and then there are other counties that are seeing none. And,
But then it would also say, excuse me, Mayor Rush, not good, I'm sorry for that. But it would also say how we actually marketing the product or service that we offer students here in Chesterfield County as opposed to whoever our competitor would be, be it charter schools, private schools, homeschool. How is our product going to continue to be the best product available?
exactly. And that's what the question becomes in the whole discussion.
Right.
So you got,
Yes, sir, that's all.
moving on down to our next item, we're down to our chairman's comments. Our next board meeting, the virtual meeting, will be at through Carmel Learning Center, February 8th, 2021. This will start at 5:30, executive session at 5. At this time, we have no more business. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I got a motion and a second. All those in favor say motion, saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Right side, motion carries. Thank you for your attendance tonight.